Let's carry on. And let's kick off the second roundtable on bottlenecks in low emission zones with Pilar Gutiérrez, Adrián Fernández from Greenpeace, who's already here, Samuel Romero from Ecologistas en Acción, and Sergio Güerri from ITENE. Pilar is already here, Javier is here, and Adrián is also here. We were kindly asked yesterday to have our speakers take off their face masks when they speak. That leads to better audio quality for our interpreters as well. I think we can give you a little more time than initially scheduled, if you like. You didn't have a lot of time to do your presentations to begin with, so if you like.
Adrián, ¿nos escuchas?
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenas.
Adrián, can you hear us? Hello. Yes, I can hear you. Hi, Adrián. Javier and Pilar, just take your seats whenever you're ready.
Vale.
Sí, al final sí. Al final sí. Sí, sí.
Pues Javier, cuando quieras.
Bueno, vamos a comenzar la mesa 6, que se titula Cuellos de Botella.
Okay, let's kick off this sixth round table titled Bottlenecks in LEZs. There are some current or possibly future obstacles to implementing LEZs across our cities, and that's what we will be discussing today. We'll be talking and hearing from Pilar Vega, whom we've known for a very long time. She's involved in urban planning and mobility, and she'll be talking to us about the introduction of LEZs into urban planning. I would kindly ask all of our speakers to deliver their presentations, if possible, in about 12-13 minutes, if that's possible. Thank you.
Lo que no se ve es la presentación. Ya. Vale. Buenas tardes a todas las personas que estáis aquí.
Good morning, everyone. I'll be talking about LEZs in urban planning and in mobility. With the approval of the Aalborg Chart in 1984, the foundations were laid for the introduction of LEZs across European cities. The goal was to bring forward our fight against climate change by using this tool. In 2004, European transport and mobility strategies once again talked about the importance of LEZs, especially for cities with over 100,000 inhabitants. The 2008 energy saving strategy also talked about the importance of sustainable mobility programs. Here in Spain, we set this in 2009 with our PEIT. All in all, for many, many years now, we have been told that we have to reduce CO2 emissions within cities, and that in order to do that, we can use an incredible tool, LEZs. In 2005, in the Basque Country, a program was implemented leading to a drastic reduction in motorized transport within the town center, which in turn led to a reduction in emissions. Once again, we talked about the importance of such programs again in Spain in 2006. In 2012, a state law was approved which amended the Sustainable Economy Law from 2011. With the new law, we tasked municipalities with developing their own mobility and sustainability programs. In a number of cities, however, no mobility plans were implemented in the short term, and they were awarded an extended deadline. The new deadline was 2014. With the Sustainable Economy Law, Spain offered subsidies towards financing public transport to those cities that had implemented mobility programs. And right now in Spain, there are pretty much no cities that are devoid of such programs. But another very important thing is restrict access to city centers for private vehicles. This is something we've been talking about actually for a very long time. The DGT, the General Directorate for Traffic in Spain, has been talking about this for a number of years now, and yet little has been done. Some mobility programs were introduced in small to medium-sized cities. In the Basque Country, for example, we had this sustainability plan, although it was called something different. It was called a mobility plan back in 2006. And thanks to this program, it is true that we did take some steps forward way before official guidelines were issued by the states. But air quality programs were also implemented in other cities, not in Madrid, for example, though. After the Mayor's Pact was approved, a number of cities committed to implementing such programs, also with a view to reducing noise pollution, but again, little action has been taken. And this takes us to the so-called PMUS, the official state guidelines, which comprises strategic guidelines, programs, and measures, but none of them are mandatory. None of them are compulsory. Now, cities that do not currently have a mobility plan are required now by law to implement one by creating LEZs. But another thing that should also be said is that this should be done properly. We can't limit ourselves to restricting access for private vehicles. We need a larger plan for our cities. We need better laws, better regulations that better protect LEZs: access control, transit control, parking control. Those are the three main measures that should be adopted within LEZs. And so far, we've been holding ourselves to rather high standards. In Madrid, for example, citizens are only allowed within the town center one parking spot per person, per tenant within a building. And in office buildings, for example, if a company has 20 employees, there will be 20 parking spots, no more. Now, that is great, because with overparking come a lot of problems. But we need better regulations, as I was saying earlier. We do have a number of laws already, but they're not necessarily complied with. We have the 2021 law on climate change and the energy transition. We have the law on air quality and atmosphere protection, the law on noise pollution, the law on sustainable mobility and public transport funding, which is about to be approved. It's scheduled for approval in 2022. And then we have a number of laws on traffic, on the circulation of combustion engine vehicles, etc., etc. So we do have a number of regulations already. We also have specific regulations in individual cities, but it's a very chaotic framework. We have the required tools that are needed to get cars out of our town centers. We need better air quality in our town centers. We've known that for a number of years, and we've known what we have to do about it for many, many years, really. But there is a lack of commitment here. How many towns have a mobility plan and yet have never implemented it? They locked it up in a drawer. A few other towns have actually started implementing their own plans, but to a limited extent. That's an issue. That's a big problem. What we lack here is the proper commitment to carry this out. And yet, these programs attract lots of subsidies and investments. So, how do we handle this? What criteria do we need to adopt to make sure that LEZs are introduced effectively? Because we do have the tools, but we also need to put all of this into practice. We need to execute this. We need people within our administrations that have the political will and that are fearless enough to take responsibility without regard of those who lobby administrations in the opposite direction. So what we need is strong models. But what we need most of all is the political will to do all of this. Thank you very much. Now we'll be talking about the management of low emission
Muy bien, hola, ¿qué tal? Muchas gracias por la oportunidad de participar en sesión. Mi nombre es Adrián, me va a acompañar Samuel, que va a hacer esta reflexión al limón sobre las cuellos de botella en el contexto concreto de las áreas metropolitanas, porque en todo momento se plantea las nuevas emisiones como una medida, como decía Pilar, no es un objetivo en sí mismo, sino una medida de
Pilar was
carácter
saying,
municipal cuando la movilidad, especialmente en las grandes áreas urbanas, pero no únicamente, no se restringe a unos límites ficticios como son los términos municipales, sino que en muchas ocasiones exceden esos límites municipales y no solo eso, sino que cuanto más exceden los límites del término municipal, mayor dependencia hay del coche. Es bastante fácil diseñar una movilidad que no dependa del coche en un casco histórico o en unos desplazamientos de corta distancia, pero en el momento en que hablamos de desplazamientos de mayor distancia, la dependencia del coche es mayor. Sin embargo, la gestión de las zonas de bajas emisiones se concibe como una medida de carácter casi exclusivamente municipal. Así lo dejan ver, además, los documentos que estamos viendo hasta el momento, la de la CEM, elaborada con la dirección, como las directrices recientemente publicadas por el Ministerio de Transición Ecológica sobre cómo tienen que ser las emisiones, lo contempla haciendo énfasis en que la competencia de la circulación es una competencia municipal y que solo en determinados casos se encuentran cedidas. Y en determinados casos, prácticamente en el contexto español, nos a un único caso, que es la área metropolitana de Barcelona, que es la zona de bajas emisiones supramunicipal que está vigente ahora mismo en el contexto español. La propia ley de cambio climático habla de la obligatoriedad a los municipios de establecer zonas de bajas emisiones antes del 2023, pero nos tenemos que preguntar qué pasa con aquellos municipios cuyo continuo urbano se junta con municipios del entorno y esa delimitación es uno de los criterios que tiene que estar bien claros a la hora de fijar las zonas de bajas emisiones, que tengan un contorno reconocible por el usuario, porque pasa cuando esa delimitación no es reconocible porque uno no sabe en qué municipio está en función de qué calle se encuentre. Esto en España es muy habitual, tenemos grandes ciudades como Bilbao, como Valencia, donde estamos, o incluso en áreas metropolitanas como Alcobendas, San Fernando de los Reyes, donde la división entre un municipio y otro no es ficticia, o sea, no es real, y la interacción entre los ciudadanos no entiende de esas fronteras imaginarias y administrativas, sino que los coches pasan de un lado a otro como que incluso una calle más. Ya es curioso porque ya en el confinamiento, cuando hubo confinamientos municipales, hubo conflictos porque la gente se saltaba el confinamiento sin tener claro que estaba saliendo de su municipio. Esto en un contexto de pandemia nos puede pasar con las zonas de bajas emisiones. Hay experiencias de estructuras supramunicipales y nos pasa a menudo con el transporte público, de las competencias de transporte público urbano sí que están cedidas a las autoridades de transporte metropolitano. Prácticamente todas las grandes áreas urbanas de España tienen el transporte urbano al menos planificado, y la parte tarifaria y de planificación depende de una entidad autonómica, una autoridad de transporte público, pero no pasa igual con las competencias de circulación. Y esto es una cuestión que diversas organizaciones hemos puesto al Ministerio que lo tuviera en cuenta. En esa versión de las directrices sí que se ha corregido, se ha hablado más de la necesidad de que la planificación de las zonas de bajas emisiones no sea estrictamente municipal, porque ya digo que hay multitud de áreas metropolitanas donde no tiene sentido ceñirnos a unos límites administrativos. Pero como es todo el documento de directrices, pues lo deja como una recomendación y no establece cuáles tienen que ser los parámetros para gestionar una zona de bajas emisiones supramunicipal, a pesar de que, como digo, ya tenemos un ejemplo en España, que es la zona de bajas emisiones de la metropolitana de Barcelona. Esta disonancia o este cuello de botella que puede dificultar el cumplimiento de la ley de cambio climático puede causar también algo que ya se ha mencionado a lo largo de las jornadas, ¿no? Que es la confusión en los criterios de acceso si cada ayuntamiento empieza a hacer criterios distintos. La función de la LEZs de armonizar el ordenamiento de la circulación se limita a establecer las etiquetas y el régimen sancionador pero lo que son las normas de acceso
sometimes
a las zonas de bajas emisiones queda a disposición de cada ayuntamiento.
If we don't look
Y
at things in a
esto,
holistic
pues,
manner, looking at not just
saldrán,
fines that could be
más allá
applied,
de
but
lo que es
also
el tráfico motor,
the exact nature of
las
certain
personas que habéis
restrictions which
utilizado
are to be
bicicletas
applied in
en
different
diferentes
areas
municipios
and
de
the
España,
exact
sabéis lo que es el caos de tener que ceñirse
benefits
a un
of
ordenanza
use
municipal
of
diferente
bicycles
en cada municipio. Un
for
conflicto que se ha
example,
ido
we are
poco a
not
poco
getting the
corrigiendo
full
en
picture,
la ley de
and
tráfico,
we
en
are
el
not
reglamento
managing
general de
things
circulación, pero que ahora
in
sufren
the
los
right
que vinieron
way.
después, que fueron los patinetes y que también tienen que sufrir
Also,
un
looking
ordenamiento
at
que es
scooters, of
dispar
course,
entre un municipio y otro.
and
Existe el
looking at
riesgo
the very
de que a la hora
different
de
ways these are
implantar
being managed
150
from one
nuevas
municipal
zonas de
area
bajas
to
emisiones,
another, and how
haya
this
una
impacts
interpretación diferente por cada
the
ayuntamiento,
whole
no solo de qué
management
etiquetas pueden
of
acceder, sino qué
traffic
permisos, qué
question
excepciones,
on
cuáles son los
the issue of
cauces
reduction
para
of
comunicar
pollution per
los
se.
permisos de acceso
We have
y
to look
muchas
at
veces
people's right to access
en
different
una cuestión como es la
areas
circulación de
using the
vehículos,
different
cuando uno va conduciendo no tiene
types
claro
of
en qué
transport, in
municipio
inverted
está
commas,
en cada momento. Pero
that
vamos, sobre
exist.
todo queríamos hacer énfasis
I
en esa
did
parte
want to
del transporte
emphasize
público. Sí que tiene una
primarily
planificación
on
transmitida, pero que se planifica el transporte
planning
público como si
for
fuera un hecho
public
aislado,
transport,
como si no estuviera
but it's
conectado
not
a las zonas de bajas
interconnected
emisiones.
with
Y yo creo
the
que
low
aquí la
emissions
conexión que tiene que
zones,
haber
and I think
de que
it does need to
una
be
ZBE va
clearly
vinculada
linked
a un
in
plan de transporte
in a
metropolitano
really
y no solo
organic way,
únicamente al plan de movilidad urbana es fundamental.
and
En
not
este
just in
punto, pues
terms of
le
the
paso la
urban mobility
palabra
plan.
a Samuel, que
I'll
nos siga
now
contando un
pass the
poco
floor to
esa vinculación
Samuel,
y
who
cuáles son
will
los retos
continue to talk
en
about the links and the
las zonas
challenges which we
metropolitanas.
are
Así que,
facing
Samuel, adelante.
in this whole area. Samuel, good morning. I hope you can all hear me well. I'm sorry that I can't be there myself, but for care reasons, we're in Valencia. We're not very far apart from each other, Adrián and yo, but anyway, I wanted to talk specifically about the tools that we can be used for planning mobility, but they're not always in consonance. If we look at the ecological health, and soon we'll be talking about also a social crisis in absolute terms, we need everything to be linked together, including housing policy. It's easy to design mobility plans, especially in low emission zones, which really are linked into the political will of a given town hall of one political color or another. But it's not linked into the whole wider context as to why we move. We don't just move for the hell of it, but because we have to go to and from work, because we have to care for people, because we have to go and buy things, etc. So the main issue that we're looking at in terms of the LEZs is that not much is concluded in terms of them, and they depend very much on the given political will which may exist at a given time, and as opposed to the whole overall context. In terms of the Valencia metropolitan area, the city that is, it's grown 60% in terms of its population in the last decade. If you analyze this in mobility terms, a low emission zone in Valencia would not solve the serious mobility problems we have in Valencia, because, as I say, it would not be enough in itself. It would be positive, of course it would, and we need one. But if we just use that tool to develop use of public transport and reduce the use of cars, which is what we want to do, it won't be enough. Adrián was also talking to issues of public transport planning. If we leave this in terms of the regional authorities, but the municipal authorities are in charge of other areas, there'll be a conflict of interests, which will not be resolved until you get a situation where a regional authority and a town hall controlled by the same political party. So urban policies, well, if we look at Madrid, for example, you can see that you can look at the whole of the different journeys taking place from south to north, because there's been overall planning taking place. If you look at the housing, the new housing, which is concentrated in the south, and you look at the north and the different areas for industry which have been established, you cannot solve all the questions in terms of public transport, because public transport wasn't included per se as an issue linked in to all the other development questions which have been addressed. What I think is that when we look at very concentrated measures, which are in a very local area, but also just specifically looking at the centers of cities, which is where we have the low emission zones, it won't be enough, because when we look at car mobility, we've always, without having the right types of lanes for bikes, for example, then we won't be solving the whole problem. We need to look at things in a holistic way, and the size of the problem we have will not be, means that it can't be solved just by controlling the degrees of access or the types of access into city centers by cars. We have to look at holistic mobility, and low emission zones won't be enough to solve it. They will partially solve the problem in the center of cities, of course, but they won't be enough. And we've seen the Madrid Central project, which and the advances it's achieved, but it wasn't capable of solving all the problems that the city has. We need to reduce car transport in all the different parts of the city, and we need to take into account town planning and also housing, because if we don't look at things in this holistic manner, we will not be able to address the question in the right way. I don't want to go any further over my time, but I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Thank you. Sergio Güerri from ITENE will look at e-commerce and its impact on urban mobility. Thank you for inviting me to this round table, because it's very interesting, everything that's been said already. Really, they make you sit up and think seriously about the different issues, things that have already been said. I'm going to talk about an activity which has been growing for years now, e-commerce. Just to give some figures, in 2020, in Spain it grew 36% with regard to the 2019, with millions of euros billed for this. Of course, the levels are becoming very, very high. Spain is considered as the country with the third highest level of e-commerce for its population. And there's a high percentage of the Spanish population which buys products online. Of course, the pandemic, which has been with us since March 2020, has had a big impact, and has also had its impact, of course, in terms of e-commerce. And we've seen a growth in delivery of fresh produce as well. But there are other factors, not just COVID-19, in terms of events or campaigns in Black Friday or Christmas or Singles Day, which have really served to make e-commerce grow, and the population has really grabbed the chance to be able to undertake more of its spending online. But all of these figures where we're talking about millions and large figures, large percentages, has a B-side, another vision in terms of the mobility and transport in the cities. So what would be the main negative points linked into this then? Traffic congestion, increase in this type of shopping means that there's an increase in the number of deliveries, an increase in the number of vans and other types of vehicles used, and linked into this there are other negative issues, for example, like the increase in CO2 emissions, and also the increase in noise pollution, and in the number of accidents, and other negative elements.
Nuestras acciones y nuestras compras diarias tienen a su vez una cara B que tenemos que intentar solucionar.
So, as I say, there is a negative side to this apparently positive development, which has been ongoing now for quite a number of years. We can look at how we can link different things together in terms of e-commerce for our daily shopping in general terms on the part of citizens, but we need to link it in to having much more sustainable mobility in our cities and ensuring that our cities are truly livable. What, of course, we want to do is to ensure that the quality of life in our cities doesn't get worse. So this means that we have to look at the introduction of measures and solutions to this end. The urban sustainable mobility plans, which have been implemented in different areas for quite a while now, especially in cities of over 20,000, needs other mitigating solutions involved as well. I also would like to say that the sustainable mobility plans for urban areas, which, as I say, have been ongoing for a number of years, in generic terms, haven't taken into account freight transport per se. So we should focus more, as I say, on freights, because congestion in cities is not just linked to private transport of citizens, but also commercial activities in terms of the distribution of goods, as I just said. So I think that the urban mobility sustainable plans need to engage with all these different types of traffic. If we want to reduce traffic per se, we need to involve all of the players, and we need to ensure that all of the users are fully involved. And we need to reduce traffic in all the senses in our cities. In addition, as I was saying,
regarding emissions, on the other hand,
that we need to vehicles are used with the new technologies so that we can also reduce emissions in that sense.
New vehicles, zero-emission vehicles, electric vehicles,
con contenedores,
as well as, for example,
lo que es incluso el transporte a pie.
Bicycles.
Y, en definitiva, también el poder disponer de...
or that we encourage walking. The goal here is to promote all of these initiatives. We started working on this a number of years back, and this new reality is here to stay. Really, last year, e-commerce sales exceeded sales in physical locations, but still, we have to guarantee high standards of quality of life within town centers, and all of these measures need to be adopted. So as a conclusion to all of this, I would say that we have to keep adapting to this new trend that is e-commerce, but we have to do so more sustainably and with the clear goal in mind of protecting the quality of life of our citizens. Now, I believe that's all from me. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Okay, so we're doing great on time. If any of our attendants or online viewers would like to intervene now, please feel free to do so. Okay, we have two questions, or reflections rather. The first one is from Pilar. She asks us, or rather she talks about parking lots in town centers, which is a bit of a controversial topic, really. Because, to be honest, I think that unless we change the mentality of our citizens, we'll be going nowhere. People in the street keep saying that we need more parking space. That's all they call for, more parking lots for cars. So surely we have to restrict access. That's very important. But at the same time, I reckon we should be striving to change this mindset that people have. And how do we do that? Because I think this mindset is responsible for this constant oversizing of parking spaces. People seem to think that it's absolutely, the cars are absolutely essential. We need to change that. And secondly, I wanted to say about what Sergio was telling us about e-commerce. That's quite worrisome. I think such high levels of online purchases are simply incompatible with a high standard of living in town centers. To give you an example, the fact that e-commerce sales have been steadily increasing as they have will eventually take a big toll on high street purchases. Our town centers, our high streets make our cities safe. You can be out and about at night, also thanks to these shops that are constantly lit up. But if they close down, our town centers will go dark, and it will, well, they will become more dangerous for our citizens. I think that's a bit of an issue. Aside from the traffic issues, brought on by these blue vans belonging to a company that I won't name, a company that has no respect because they're constantly driving around our cities and they double park in front of the buildings where they have to make their delivery, or even they park on the pavement. Well, that's completely incompatible with a high standard of living. In e-commerce needs to be made compatible with a more respectful, more sustainable way of transporting merchandise and freight. If there aren't any more questions, I believe our speakers can weigh in now. What's your name, Marga? Okay, nice to meet you. I'm from Valladolid as well. I completely agree. I don't think e-commerce can become more sustainable. Actually, e-commerce destroys local commerce, and if local commerce is destroyed, cities are destroyed. One of the most fundamental components of cities is, well, precisely this, local commerce. Local commerce is the foundation of our social fabric, and without it, everything else is unsustainable. E-commerce is highly unsustainable because it entails lots of packaging, and then surely we can deliver Amazon products by bike, but that really doesn't have an impact because the whole supply chain behind the delivery of that product is completely unsustainable. So you are right. What we need to change is this mindset that society has regarding car use. In the past, the paradigm we lived by was different. According to this paradigm, people needed to be allowed to drive around town centers in their cars. And that's, well, we built our cities around this. I'm very sorry, I'm feeling very husky today. Now, we need a cultural change. We need to create a new mobility culture whereby the paradigm, the center of planning, lies with the people. And in order for that to be, well, feasible, we need to, as you were saying, change their mindset. There was this picture of Madrid from a few years back where people were free to walk around the Cibeles statue in the town center. Now that's no longer the case. That's car territory. But I think we're slowly but surely winning out this battle. Administrators are talking about this, and they will keep on doing that in the future. People seem to enjoy the new spaces that they've won back for themselves. They like urban life. And regarding parking spaces, I agree with you, that's a big problem. What do they do in other countries? Neighborhoods that are serviced by public transport are inaccessible to private vehicles. Public transport is key here. As you get further and further away from town centers, there are, of course, fewer public transport options, and it's logical that you need more parking space, but not in the town center. So this is all about revolutionizing our urban landscape, our urban morphology. Valladolid was very different back in the 80s. There were cars, of course, but there are so many more now. We need a transition, even if only a slow one. We need a cultural change. And what's key here is education. That's fundamental. We need to educate young children in schools about this. It is difficult, sure. we have a model that's made certain parts of our cities simply inaccessible to bicycles or to pedestrians. That's what we were talking about with Jaime earlier. Industrial areas in our towns are inaccessible by pedestrians because cities have simply been planned this way. All of this needs to be rationalized. We need to change the culture of our workers, but we also need to change the culture of our urban planners. So there are a lot of steps to take, a lot of buttons to push, for sure. The goal needs to be a completely new scenario within this country. Sergio, over to you. You had a comment for Sergio, didn't you? Yes. Marga, your name is Marga, correct? I agree with you in that local commerce is absolutely fundamental, and I don't think local businesses will ever disappear because that's something people still want. As buyers, we need to establish some sort of physical contact with the products we purchase. Also, going shopping is a social event. It's an opportunity to talk to people around us. E-commerce, on the other hand, which again is here to stay, has some characteristics that are highly appreciated by a large part of the population. Again, it's here to stay, and I agree it's difficult to change the mindset of people. What, in my opinion, we should try to achieve is, one, as my colleague was saying earlier, raise awareness. We need to raise awareness because, again, e-commerce is here to stay, so we may as well at this point accept it, embrace it, but make it more sustainable, surely. Now, large amounts of commodities, of products are driven around our town centers, and that has a negative impact. Returns have an even worse impact for obvious reasons, but we can sort that out. For example, we can pick up our parcels ourselves in dedicated hubs or even in local shops. Because I agree with you. I mean, local businesses are absolutely fundamental for our cities, but e-commerce, again, is here to stay. It will not go away. It will not disappear. And that's regardless of the increase in e-commerce sales that we saw during the pandemic. We can solve this problem by promoting LEZs, by promoting alternate means of transport. You also touched upon the issue of packaging, and you were right to do so. In e-commerce, people use a lot of packaging, but a lot of that can be recycled and reused. Certain brands, which I won't name, go to extreme lengths to reuse their packaging because they're aware of the impact it has on the environment. Now, if we can make this model, which is necessary in this day and age, once again, compatible with existing local commerce models, then that's it. We've done it. Of course, it's difficult, but I absolutely agree with you. Local commerce is fundamental to cities.
Sí, hay una cuestión que no quería dejar pasar por alto, que ha comentado antes Marga, y es cuando dice que los barrios parece que solo se pide aparcamiento, que es una de las principales demandas. Y es cierto que cuando uno abre canales de participación es una de las cuestiones más demandadas. La gente quiere más aparcamientos. Y esto contrasta con la sociedad que tenemos, donde casi la mitad de la población no tiene carnet de conducir y más de un 60% no tiene coche propio. ¿Por qué hay esta demanda cultural? Y esto sucede por un cambio cultural que se hacía referencia antes, pero también no podemos obviar que el perfil de quien tiene un vehículo, estamos hablando que es el perfil que más capacidad tiene de hacerse oír. Estamos hablando de un perfil mayoritariamente hombres, de mediana edad y de mayor poder adquisitivo que el resto de la población. No se escucha a los niños, no se escucha a los ancianos, no se escucha a la gente con menos poder adquisitivo. Los medios, desde luego, no ponen el foco en esa clase de población y da la sensación de que la mayoría de la gente lo que quiere es más aparcamiento, cuando en realidad se pone el foco en la población que sabe hacerse oír. Mi consejo con esto es que evidentemente hay que potenciar un cambio cultural y desde las ONGs lo estamos impulsando así, pero cualquier ciudadano puede hacer mucho también por hacerse oír, ciudadanos de a pie, que no sean solo los de los coches que se quejan y ponen el grito del cielo cuando quitan aparcamientos o cuando hay las emisiones. Mi llamamiento, yo lo intento hacer a nivel personal, pero mi llamamiento es que todos lo intentemos hacer y cuando entremos a un comercio, cuando hablemos, digamos, oye, pues qué bien está esta calle ahora que hay menos coches, qué bien sería quitar estos coches aquí en medio, hacer ver que esa sensación de que todo el mundo pide aparcamiento no es así, ni mucho menos. Que hay otra parte de la gente que queremos otro tipo de ciudad, queremos otro modelo. Por eso hay que hacernos oír, escribir cartas al director, participar en medios, llamar al alcalde que hay canales de participación, lo que sea. No dejemos que quien ya tiene voz, que son principalmente quienes ya tienen coche, sean los representantes de la ciudadanía.
And they're not representative of our societies and citizens as a whole. Thank you very much. Let's wrap up this roundtable.
Pues muchísimas gracias a Adrián, a Samuel, a Sergio.
Thank you very much, Adrian, Samuel, Sergio, Pilar, and Javier, for moderating this round table.